Welcome, and thank you for joining Amplified Wealth According to Plan. I am Kate Fishbein, and I am joined with my co-host, Tom Farrell. Greetings, Tom.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
Good. I hear congratulations is in order. You've had a couple of graduations recently in the household.
Thank you. Yep, the Farrell kids are moving on to bigger and better schools at this point. So my son graduated from 8th grade. He'll be starting high school in the fall. And my daughter is being promoted to middle school. So big steps for the kiddos.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Exciting times. And education is always, such an important topic. And I know that there have been some recent changes, in 529 plans that I know we're going to discuss today. And I'm excited to share with our listeners. So let's jump right in.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that just from a formatting standpoint, we're gonna this one will be a little bit quicker in terms of total timeline. We want to hit on some of the most recent updates to 529 plans that we think are pretty exciting, and you may have read some articles and saw some headlines in the news about some of these changes. So Kate and I are looking forward to chatting about some of that today.
Absolutely. Anything that, we can help our listeners do to, plan and prepare for these expenses is great. Tom, you want to start with the first update here?
Sure. So the media is referring to to one of these updates as the Grandparent 529 loophole, which is catchy. Whenever you hear the term loophole, your ears kind of prick up a little bit.
Yeah, you kind of pay attention.
Yeah, and the media needs something to give something a little bit more sexiness to it. So essentially, what we're talking about here is what's the impact if somebody else in your extended family has a 529 and they're using that 529 to benefit a particular beneficiary in terms of college costs. So, grandparent 529s certainly is a topic that we talk to our clients about all the time. And historically, when a student was going through the college application process and looking for some financial aid, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid.
I'm glad you got that right.
Yeah, thank you. I had to spit that one out. I like to call it FAFSA for short, and so does everybody else.
Much easier.
It would, it would ask a bunch of questions, including they wanted to know, if any distributions were coming to the student for the benefit of funding college. And so historically, those 529 distributions from a grandparent-owned 529 to the beneficiary, the college student, would be counted as untaxed income, and that would have a negative impact on financial aid. And that makes sense. Right. Clients spend a lot of time, saving money so that they can help pay for college. And what would happen is, let's say there was a $20,000 distribution from a grandparent 529 to the college student. That would reduce the financial aid eligibility by up to 50% of the distribution. So if they distributed $20,000 to their grandchild, then the grandchild's potential federal student aid would be reduced by half, about $10,000.
That's huge. And if I recall, too, that was always kind of like in subsequent years, right? So it was like that the change wasn't immediate. It was always kind of like the subsequent years that would impact. That's right.
Yeah. So in terms of planning on distributions, there's a timeline in terms of when they would come out and when they would impact the application process. And so you fast forward to the update. So Congress went through and issued a FAFSA Simplification Act. There's a bunch of different updates in there, and obviously the one we're talking about here is the impact on those third party, right? They don't necessarily have to be a grandparent 529, but this is essentially a lot of what families are doing, and. So that's going to impact the 2024-2025 school year. So that's going to be a big benefit for students that are applying through the FAFSA process. And one of the things that we wanted to point out is, this doesn't have a rosy impact on every situation. Mostly private universities don't use the FAFSA. They have their own process. where they still will look at grandparent-owned and third-party-owned 529s for the benefit of the student applying to that university. And so those assets and distributions will be counted in terms of any kind of aid that the student is looking for. So this won't really have a positive impact on those students who are applying to private universities. But it's still, this is still an important thing for, for our clients to know, and for investors that are, trying to save and help their family members go to college.
Absolutely. And it could be a big benefit. So, and a step in the right direction, for some folks that this might help. So that's great. And I think, one of the other concerns for a lot of individuals who are saving for education is sometimes kind of like overfunding the account, right? Like you kind of want to save like the perfect amount. You don't want to undersave and you don't want to oversave. And I think a lot of times when, parents are funding 529 plans for children, some of the concerns are, well, my son's very good at soccer. What if he gets a soccer scholarship and we don't need these funds? Or, what if my child doesn't go to college, and what to do with unused funds in a 529 plan? And, you do have some choices. So I thought we could review some of those choices and then get into more detail as to some of the new exciting changes. Typically, unused funds in a 529 plan, sure, you can take a distribution, right? But you're going to have to pay that 10% penalty and taxes on any earnings. And that penalty and taxes really only applies to the earnings portion. And then, of course, that's on the federal side. And then there's always state taxes.
Yeah, one of the biggest reasons that 529s have become so popular is because of their tax advantage status. In an ideal situation, Kate, people would save in a 529. They would get the savings hopefully just right. They would make those distributions when their child was in college. And then as long as those distributions were made for qualified higher education expenses, then that would be a fully tax-free distribution, right? That's the
perfect
beauty,
world.
Right. That's the beauty of the 529 plan.
Yeah.
And because there's no tax benefit on the contributions going in, these are essentially after-tax contributions made into the 529 plan. And then once everything is inside the account, there's no taxes that are owed whatsoever on any of the growth or any adjustments to investments that you might make along the way. So you get your basis back without any tax or penalty, right? To your point about just the earnings we're talking about here.
Right. And of course, we're talking about, if it was a distribution made for non-educational expenses, right? So just taking the money out because you weren't going to use them for education. And then, of course, there's this great option where you can always change the beneficiary of the 529 plan. And now, given you have to change that beneficiary, it has to be a U.S. citizen or a resident alien. The individual needs to have a social security number or a tax ID. But essentially, you can change the beneficiary in this 529 plan as many times as you'd like. And remember, in order for a beneficiary change not to be considered a distribution from the 529 plan, the individual you elect essentially needs to be an eligible family member. And you can even change the beneficiary on the 529 plan to be yourself. We often think of ourselves last, but, if you had a higher education goal or something along those lines, that's also an option to consider as well.
Yeah, I've had some clients that have opened up 529s before the kids were born, just to get the money, growing and compounding. And to your point, yeah, they could just name themselves as the initial beneficiary and then change it to their child once they're born.
Yep, for sure. And the longer, the funds grow, the more exciting it becomes. And that's also where I think 529 plans as a legacy tool for some folks. So if you have unused plans, and let's say you had, your child initially as the beneficiary, your child didn't use the funds, and then, kids get bigger as they do. And then your child has a child, you could name your grandchild, as the beneficiary. And the longer that these funds, as Tom mentioned, these are growing, it's a tax advantaged account. The more they are, growing that interest, they're compounding over time, the more exciting this as a legacy tool, I think, can become. So to mention that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, I think the flexibility, not only with just how they've evolved over time, but to your point, the ability to change beneficiaries to other family members, given whatever circumstances might arise. We should probably, make sure that we're we're letting the public know, letting our clients know. Doesn't have to be, just for one particular person. It could be benefiting other people in their extended family, should they choose to do so. And then even in a scholarship situation, that could be something where, even if the money's not used for that particular child, there could be another child, it could be a sibling in the family that does need that. Or, maybe they get to a point where they're going to grad school, right? And you still need to be able to use 529 assets to pay for those costs.
Absolutely. There are a lot of different educational costs that can be considered. So exciting tool for sure. And then there's this amazing recent update in Secure Act 2.0, which was passed in 2022. You're now able to convert a lifetime $35,000 to a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. So let's dive more into this, because I think that this is a really exciting update for folks. So, again, it says lifetime $35,000, but there are always rules, Tom.
Lots of rules.
Always rules, just to make things complicated, but that's why we're here.
Yeah. And some misconceptions about how this actually works. So let's walk through the rules here.
Absolutely. So rule number one, you can't just open a 529 plan and roll it into a Roth IRA. Too good to be true. So the 529 plan must have been maintained for at least 15 years, right? So get it open. So maybe your neighbor was doing the right thing. But anyway, get that. Start the clock ticking. That 15 years, so that's a long time.
It is, yeah.
Also, the Roth IRA must be in the name of the beneficiary. So of the 529 plan. So meaning if I have a 529 plan for my daughter, I can't just roll the funds into my Roth IRA because I think it's a good idea. So it has to go from my daughter's 529 plan into my daughter's Roth IRA. So beneficiaries have to match. So another little caveat. And then contributions made within the last 5 years, even the earnings on those contributions are ineligible for this, tax-free transfer. So you have to have those funds in for at least 5 years. So I can't just fund, I can't just put $5,000 into the 529 plan and just poof, roll it over into the Roth IRA. The funds and the earnings on those funds need to be in there for at least 5 years. And then the other little caveat is you're capped at converting the annual maximum contribution limit each year. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's another little confusing point for folks. So you can't do that full $35,000 at once. And I know it's so tempting, it's like, let's just get it done with. Let's do it all at once, but you can't. It's just how it works. So you're capped at the lesser amount of the 529 plan's beneficiaries' earned income or the $7,000 max. So whatever those lesser amounts are. And when I say $7,000 max, that's for 2024. The maximum amount is dependent on that year's maximum Roth IRA contribution. And remember, that's going to change over time. But for someone under 50 in 2024, the maximum amount is $7,000. So remember, there's that earned income rule with Roth IRAs as is, which means that you need to have wages, you need to have compensation to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. And those same rules apply here for this rollover as well. So essentially, if your son or daughter is, making $4,000 lifeguarding over the summer or whatever the case is, so again, it's the lesser of, that compensation and or $7,000. So therefore, if your son or daughter only earned $4,000, that's what you would be capped at for that rollover conversion for that year. Unlike other Roth IRAs, where we have that maximum income cap, there is no income cap here. So I think that's exciting for some folks. So in that instance where your son or daughter or whoever goes to graduate school or, graduates and they have a really high paying position, I think the maximum for 2024 to be able to max out on a Roth IRA, I think it's $146,000 for 2024 for income. So even if you're over that $146,000 for 2024, you're still able to do this rollover conversion. So I think that's exciting for some folks. And then, of course, there's always this no double dipping rule with the IRS, right? You can have fun, but you can have too much fun. No double dipping. So meaning you can't do this conversion and contribute to the Roth IRA. So it's kind of, you're capped at the 7,000 max. And remember, that's between all contributions. So that's between Roth IRA contributions, traditional IRA contributions, and now this rollover. So something to keep in mind, that max is that max.
Yeah, I mean, I think clients need to be careful here. Some folks are in the mode of making an annual IRA contribution just part of their, their normal savings plan. So
Sure.
if they're going to be introducing this feature, if they meet the requirements that you just laid out, it is important to have that conversation and plan out if I'm eligible, if the student has enough earned income to max out, right, that $7,000 this year, just to make sure that there's no other contributions that are being made elsewhere, right, just from other earned income into any of those IRAs. So I think, just being able to, one, plan if you're eligible to do this, and number two, just make sure that you're not overfunding any of these IRAs for any given year. But just another layer of checks and balances to take advantage of this particular opportunity.
Definitely. So an exciting possibility, but and of course there are always some little hiccups that we want folks to watch out for as well. Of course, always discuss with your tax professionals as well. But right now it's not certain as to whether some states are going to conform with these federal changes. So it could be possible that maybe there are state tax liabilities. So just kind of a heads up there. So again, really making sure you're looping in your accountant and being aware of, your state law as well. And then, if you do change the beneficiary, there's some uncertainty surrounding this. And, as I see it, that we're still kind of awaiting some further clarification on this particular item. But, if you change the beneficiary, even though the account's been opened for 15 years, if you change that beneficiary, you have to wait the full 15 years. Could you change the beneficiary and then, to yourself and then roll over funds into your own Roth IRA? It's not sure. We're not sure yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because, from what I've read so far, and it is ambiguous. So we do need some clarification on what that looks like. But, so as long as the 529 itself has been in existence for 15 years and funded, right? And let's say you start with one beneficiary and you do the full 35,000 or so. Could you then switch beneficiaries and immediately start doing conversions for that beneficiary because the 529 had met the 15-year rule? So it's a bit unclear, right? There's some questions about is this per beneficiary? Is it per account? It seems that it's per beneficiary, in which case, if there's $100,000 left in the 529, you could do 35,000 for one beneficiary, change it, and then another 35,000 over several years for another beneficiary. So I think because it's going to be an annual type of a distribution, requirement, the IRS does have a little bit of time to provide some of that guidance that we're looking for on some of this. But right now, I guess the message that we want to make sure that we're getting out there is that it's not 100% clear yet.
Yeah, and this is typical. This is a new change for 2024, right? So there's still some kinks that are being worked out for sure. And another little kind of hiccup is kind of this 5-year rule, right? Which is the funds need to be in the account for 5 years to be able to do this, rollover into the Roth. So the tricky part there is right now, as I understand, most custodians really aren't tracking earnings on that contribution portion. You might be able to track the contribution portion, but how much did that contribution make, over that period of time? So that might be a little bit of a hang up too. And, hopefully it will get maybe easier over time, maybe, hopefully custodians see a need for that, tracking the earnings portion on those contributions. So therefore, you're able to have a little bit more clarity as to what can be rolled over and when.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some pushback from the custodians, right? The record keeping portion of this is going to be complicated, to your point. So they're going to want some more time, I think, to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, for sure. And then certainly, as we mentioned earlier, when you have that 529 plan, you can change the beneficiary, right? You're kind of king of the castle. Once you've moved these 529 plans into a Roth IRA, you are kind of handing over the baton to that Roth IRA account holder, right? You no longer have control over, changing the funds or, having control over the funds. So that could be a big hang up for some folks, right? You're kind of completely handing over the baton, and then obviously, it's irrevocable. So this is they will do with the funds as they see fit.
Yeah, I think the only maybe one thing to remind folks is that because this is not a regular taxable brokerage account, in which case if you did these distributions, then the student could essentially take the money out right away and blow it on XYZ. Because it's a Roth IRA, those are long-term retirement accounts. So the likelihood that the money will stay in the account and be invested for a long period of time, I think is still pretty high. But it's a good point. You are relinquishing that control that 529 owners have over the account.
Sure, absolutely. And then, of course, there are different distribution rules for Roth IRAs, and sometimes it's a little confusing. But there are sometimes you are able to take distributions out of Roth IRAs, on the principal, without penalty. So will that be tracked with these rollovers? That's another kind of thing I'm not certain on. And then, to your earlier point, right? Don't forget about graduate school. So before you go, rolling over the funds after your graduate, hangs up their cap and gown, you never know. They might end up back at school. So before you do these, rollovers, just consider other education expenses. And as we said earlier, too, other family members or, people that you might want to help, with your education savings.
Yeah, and grad school may not be an immediate step right after they're finished with undergrad. They could work for a year or two, then decide to go back to grad school. So I think having a conversation with the beneficiary about what their plans look like, probably a good use of time just to see if that might be a good use of the money. And you may want to just keep it in the 529 plan.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just mentioned earlier, sometimes those 529 plans can be amazing legacy tools for folks. Because of that, Einstein did coin compounding interest, the eighth wonder of the world. So, just having the funds in there compounding over time can be an amazing thing.
That's right. No tax drag.
That's it. So I think that sums up what we had to discuss today. This was, I think, a really helpful conversation. I'm excited for, some of these changes, within my family, and I'm sure you are too, Tom.
Yeah. I think that the flexibility of 529 plans continues to surprise me, I guess. There's lots of different areas of the tax code that are becoming a little bit more restrictive. And, 529 plans have gotten just more and more flexible. Competition is great, from state to state. Fees are down. Investment choices are much better. And, what can you do with extra capital at the end of, once your child finishes school? Those choices are becoming, more robust for clients. So I think that's a great thing. And if anybody has, any more questions or, wants to chat with us about this, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to talk and continue the conversation.
Yeah, and Roth IRAs are such an amazing vehicle, and this could really help a lot of folks coming out of college, maybe get a head start on building that nest egg.
That's right.
So great. Well, thanks for joining us. And,
thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube if you're following us there, and wherever you get your podcast, make sure you subscribe to future episodes.
Great. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.